Well, welcome to the HealthBiz podcast. I'm David Williams, president of strategy consulting firm Health Business Group. And if you enjoy this podcast, please hit the like button and subscribe. I'm joined today by Lyron Bentovim, president and CEO of Glimpse Group. Lyron, welcome to the HealthBiz podcast.
Great to be here.
Listen, you have a very illustrious career, and not to mention all sorts of interesting things you're doing now. So it's going to be an exciting one. I want to start off just asking about kind of your background, your upbringing. What was your early life like, and what are some of the influences that you took away from the early days?
So I grew up kind of moving around, which obviously influenced my ability to change and kind of do different things in my career, I think. So I grew up in Israel, spent some of my years in England, and then moved to the US for grad school. So kind of between those three countries and moving different towns between them, I got a lot of different experiences of starting over and kind of getting to acclimate in different environments, and allows me to constantly morph my career as well. So that's been a overall trend.
That's pretty good. I've spoken to a number of people, on the podcast, and I don't know if it's big enough to have a statistically significant sample, but who kind of moved around a lot as they were growing up, and maybe gave more experiences or gave them a chance to know that, hey, I better put myself forward here in a new environment and not just be complacent. So maybe that is a common theme.
Yeah, no, there's definitely kind of something about kind of always changing environments kind of allows you to kind of be open to change.
Now, what did you study in terms of undergraduate and grad school?
So actually, kind of one of my decision points, kind of early in my kind of academic decision was, do I go and I've kind of always been a computer kind of hacker, programmer kind of when I was growing up. And do I take that as a business and go kind of study kind of engineering or computer science, or do I go on the business side? And I chose the business side, so I actually have an undergrad in law and economics. Yeah. And then I went and did my MBA at Yale. So I stayed on the business side, but I have a good understanding of what it takes to actually build the stuff that I'm trying to envision.
It's useful, both for being realistic and keeping those developers honest when they tell you it's going to take a little longer, or, it can't be done.
Yeah, definitely.
So where did you start off after business school? What was your path, and how was it?
So yeah, my path was a very interesting and different one, and it's kind of basically I'm a serial entrepreneur on one side, yet I've got every now and again gotten kind of real experiences, kind of basically learning to shave on other people's beards, kind of thing. So I started on the management consulting side. I did my summer in business school in McKinsey, and then joined a McKinsey spin-off. So the financial services group at McKinsey in London and New York spun out and created a firm called Mitchell Madison Group. And I spent 3 years with that group, basically helping Fortune 1000 companies address strategic problems, and got a lot of kind of experiences working with kind of pretty senior teams in pretty big companies trying to solve kind of big problems. So that's where I started. And then when I finished business school, it was 1997. As you can count from those kind of years, as I got later in my consulting career, I was living in the Bay Area at the time, and it was the dot-com days, and everybody around me was kind of having a lot of fun with kind of the dot-com startup scene in the Bay Area. And at some point, I had the itch to go do that myself. So I took a project that I tried to work kind of that tied to that technology with Federated Department Stores that was successful in terms of they really liked the suggestion, but they never implemented it. I decided to create a variation of that on my own and started a company called Webrix that basically tried to do physical presence for online retailing, which was probably 20 years ahead of its time.
Nice. Well, I remember those days. I actually had a summer internship in McKinsey as an undergraduate in London in the financial services group, some years before you were there. And then during the time of the dot-com boom, I was at Boston Consulting Group. And I remember, we had all these ideas about dot-com, and one of the big clients like you were describing to do it, and they mostly weren't ready for it. So a number of people went up and did that. And I guess after you learned how to operate the sub-zero refrigerator, then the next step was to try to actually make things happen. So it's heady times for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, so it's kind of one of those things you kind of, and that's a ongoing theme.
Yeah.
I get to advise people, and then I get the itch to actually do it, and kind of you can see that repeat itself in my career.
That's very nice. Okay, so now give us a glimpse of Glimpse. What is Glimpse overall? Normally we're interviewing people that are just focused on healthcare, and I know Glimpse goes beyond that. But we'll talk about the healthcare fit. But what is Glimpse?
So Glimpse, I co-founded Glimpse in 2016. So as you look at late 2015, early 2016, it dawned on me that we're in the beginning of a new tech cycle. And those tech cycles are 35 years where multiple technologies get together and really kind of take our world one step further. And I grew up in the previous one, and it sounds like you and I kind
Yeah.
of went through the same, and where the three technologies, PC, mobile, and internet, basically got together from the early 80s, and then as they went through that cycle, kind of basically moved the world from an analog world, which we lived in as kids, to the digital world where we are kind of in right now. But that digital world is a 2D world. And I saw an opportunity of a new tech cycle that's going to take us from a digital world to an immersive world. And the three technologies that are moving us in that direction are immersive technologies, that's virtual reality, augmented reality, together with AI and blockchain. And I saw that opportunity in early 2016 and wanted to build a company that will be able to do really well in the early part of the cycle, which is the hard one because there's no
Yeah.
market, and kind of build a unique concept, taking a lot of different methodologies and concepts that I play around with throughout my career and put them together to build what I call is a platform company for immersive, enterprise focused immersive technologies companies. So what we do is we're in a sense a holding company. We call it a platform company, but we have multiple subsidiary companies, all fully owned and operated by Glimpse, but each has their own brand and all technology, and they're all focusing on a variety of enterprise use cases for these immersive technologies.
So, in healthcare, sometimes we say it's easy to do technology in healthcare because you're 30 years behind what anybody else is doing. So in some ways you would put it last, but on the other hand, it's one of the, the early ones that you've got within the platform. And then, I think when I say that to doctors about, not adopting technology, they say, no, well, adopt the technology if it's any good. And in fact, physicians individually use technology. So where does healthcare fit both in sort of the overall time frame and then within, kind of this big tech cycle that you're talking about?
So healthcare is going to be a major part. So, and kind of immersive technologies are going to morph healthcare in a big way over this cycle. Healthcare historically has not been an early adopter of technology, but we're seeing a lot of experimentation. So, as much as organized healthcare takes its while, kind of people that play in healthcare are very innovative because they're constantly trying to do new things, come up with new drugs, new therapies, new ways of doing things, and that leads them to explore immersive technologies. So we're seeing a lot of interest in understanding how immersive technologies can help a variety of different healthcare companies do things differently.
And what would be a good example or two in healthcare, where there's sort of a crying need for immersive technologies?
When you look at the whole interaction between patient and therapist or doctor, and telehealth is one of those things that the technology existed for a long while, but it took COVID to really push that into practice. And now everybody, it's kind of funny because everybody was against it. Kind of the health systems were against it, the doctors were against it, the patients were against it. Everybody wanted to do the old way.
Yeah.
Now I think all three of those groups are seeing the benefits of telehealth. And I think where immersive technologies is going to help a lot with that is bringing telehealth into a more kind of immersive element. So telehealth is very 2D, which gives you a chance to talk, and kind of the doctor obviously or the therapist can see the patient. But I think being together in an immersive way will be a lot more powerful than the 2D telehealth that is already kind of taking ground. So that's kind of one of the elements. The second big element is training professionals. And one of the biggest challenges of training, it's doctors and nurses and medical professionals and therapists and everybody is the only real way to get real training is by doing
Yeah.
it. And you can't do it unless you are actually dealing with real life patients. And it's one of those things where kind of you can't get a lot by just watching over the shoulder of someone doing it. And if you're doing it, you are actually dealing with people's bodies or minds as you're helping them. And it's one of those things that it's almost shocking that we have doctors and therapists that are actually pretty good out there in the world, given the fact that it's very limited in how they can get trained.
Let's go back to that telehealth example for a minute. So as you said, there were 20 years. We worked on this back in the year actually in the dot-com boom. What happened was they had Hotmail that was sold to Microsoft for, I think, $300 million at the time. And everybody says, let's do Hotmail for doctors, and so they had doctor-patient web-based communication. Most of those companies didn't really go anywhere. And it took until the pandemic to actually have kind of telehealth happen, and it was done, at the time with video. And one of the things that's interesting is that now we're seeing, after it going from like 1% up to 80% of visits, it's back down to 20% or something like that. But everybody has the experience of it, and there's a lot of things that kind of hold it back. And I wonder whether some of that immersive element is actually what could take it from the new baseline up to a higher baseline and solve some of the problems, some of the limitations that it has today.
In most places, kind of the doctor needs to see you, and kind of obviously seeing you kind of in a kind of 3D camera gives you a lot more perspective. And for you to see the doctor, you don't even you can see them as an avatar. You don't really need to see the real doctor. You want to get the feeling that you're in a real place and the doctor kind of. And I think the technology exists to create that experience. Now, when you go into areas where the doctor doesn't need to really see you, but you want to have that immersive experience, and those are therapy sessions and group sessions, that's where right now the technology makes it kind of a no-brainer to do that.
Yeah.
And it saves you the trouble of going places, and sometimes it's hard, especially if you're looking for groups, to find groups, or sometimes you want to have anonymity, which VR can give you that without kind of ruining the experience.
One of the areas why there hadn't been so much adoption of telehealth is like anything in healthcare where reimbursement makes a big difference. And I think one of the legitimate objections to telehealth was that if you previously had the situation of an in-person visit and now you put it on telehealth, well, first you have to schedule the telehealth appointment. You have the telehealth appointment and they say, hey, I really need to see you. So now you've had that additional visit that costs something, and then there's the delay of the person actually coming to see them. And I think the immersive technologies can actually help to reduce the number of times that happens.
For sure.
So let's talk about mental health. I know that's been an area of interest in general for telehealth and other sorts of remote technologies. And I think for AR and VR, there's a lot of potential role for that in mental health. Are you seeing that? Are you involved in it?
Yes, we're definitely seeing that. And we're actually kind of involved, kind of recently done a partnership with a company called Pastea that basically is using ketamine to deal with some mental health issues. And they're going to use a solution that kind of our Fortel subsidiary created to allow those patients, as they're going through that treatment, to be somewhere else rather than in that room. And it's very important to create that environment and control that environment and allow the therapist to kind of monitor what's going on and interact in that environment in a lot of ways. And that solution that we just finished and kind of delivered to them, so they're going to start using it shortly, is a material way of kind of leveraging virtual reality to augment the ketamine therapy.
Interesting. So, what I had heard as related to telehealth and mental health was that even before the pandemic, there's quite a fair amount of interest because some people have mental health disorders. They could deal better over a text link or in some way not sort of face-to-face with the therapist. So on the one hand, there's interest in it and feeling that it could be helpful. On the other hand, I know that during the pandemic when there's a lot of anxiety and depression, sometimes the therapist would say it's better for the patient actually to get out of their environment and to come somewhere else as part of the therapy, and it may just be enabling them if they are left kind of where they are. I don't know if you have a view on that, and how AR and VR could either improve that or make it worse.
Well, kind of the thing about immersive technology is they allow you to customize the environment in a way you can't do in the real world. And I can create a scenario where I'm talking to someone and that someone doesn't exist. So if you and I were sitting in a room, you cannot disappear.
Yeah.
Yes, you can talk to me, kind of, but for you to see me, I need to see you. Kind of. So obviously in VR we can create an environment where you're something different. You can be an animal. Kind of. We were working with a group that kind of is dealing with kids that have had trauma, and they found that they actually feel more comfortable talking to animals than to real people. What if the therapist could be the animal, right? Obviously, in the real world, a therapist cannot become a dog.
Yeah.
In VR, no problem. The therapist kind of wears a headset, but instead of having a human avatar, they look like a dog. And the kid is playing with the dog and talking to the dog about what happened in that environment. So this is an example of what you can do. I can make the therapist look different. I can change the environment. We can sit on a mountain. We can sit in the forest. We can be on the shore. Whatever we want to be, that will help us get the therapy to be the most effective, is something that you can very easily create in VR, where in the real world you just can't. Kind of, yes, if the therapist is local and you think it's better for you guys to sit on a bench near the beach,
Yeah.
you can probably meet there and do the session, but it gets harder, and the weather, and everybody needs to travel there. In VR, you can make the change kind of on the spot. So you can start a session and you see that that's not working out and say, wait, let's go to the forest and see what happens. And you click a button and now you're in the forest, and you see if that's giving you the right approach or not. The other thing that's critical in immersive technology is there is a lot of analytics that we can provide because it's all in a digital world. So I can tell you if the patient is looking at you or not, as an example, and what percent of the time he's looking you in the eyes versus looking around, and whether it's good or bad that he's looking at you. That's your kind of, that ties to how you deal with him. But you can get that information and you can react and change what you're doing to get the patient to react to you in the way that makes sense for what you're trying to do with them.
Got it. Now, we've been talking about immersive technologies, and we've been saying AR and VR, and I know what they stand for, and I have some idea what they mean, but can you distinguish between AR and VR and talk about how they maybe work together, or if one replaces the other?
Yeah, so they work together, and I'll define them first. So virtual reality is you're basically creating a new world, and that world could be either computer generated or actually recorded as a 360 video or image, and you're immersing that person in that environment by using VR headset. So once you put the headset on, all your senses, at least your vision and your hearing, are immersed in that world. You forget about the world you're in right now. You don't see it and you can barely hear it.
Yeah.
And your brain thinks you're somewhere else, and your brain will react to what's happening based on that. So that's virtual reality. So in a sense, it takes you from the real world to a virtual world. Augmented reality does almost the opposite. It brings digital assets into your real world. So you're interacting with augmented reality either through your smartphone or tablet right now. All of the advanced ones that are out there have augmented reality capability. You can interact with them through dedicated AR headsets. So there's Microsoft HoloLens, there's Magic Leap, there's a lot of customized, more industrial use kind of headsets that are out there. And you can interact with augmented reality through those. And down the road, we will have personalized glasses. There's got a lot of talk about Apple working on them and Meta, Facebook working on them. And those will come out over time. So in augmented reality, you bring digital assets, information into your world that exists. So let's tie those back into the therapy scenarios. So in one scenario, I put my virtual reality headset on, and let's say you're my therapist and we're meeting, could be in your virtual office, could be in the park, could be anywhere you want to take. My room doesn't matter, your room doesn't matter. We don't see any of that. We are in an environment that we chose to be effective for what we're trying to do. In augmented reality, I would wear augmented reality glasses or headsets, and I would either bring you into my office or you would bring me into your office, and we will see each other, but in each other's offices. Or you can bring information or things to do, but they will be in the world that we're in right now.
Got it. All right. So now you started to mention this actually in your answer, but the metaverse, you said Meta, which was Facebook. The metaverse, is that a real thing, or is it just marketing? And how do we relate the
The
metaverse?
metaverse will be a real thing.
Yeah.
So kind of it's one of those things. Kind of I give a lot of talks on what is the metaverse.
Yeah.
That's kind of a very popular discussion, and the metaverse will be, in my view, the kind of the end goal of this tech cycle. So just like in a sense the internet with all of the things that come around that is kind of basically kind of the end result of that digital cycle, and everything we're doing right now is through the internet in some capacity, including like doing this video call as an example,
Yep.
kind of. And so the metaverse will be a 3D version of the internet, meaning you will be able to go into virtual offices, you'll be able to go into virtual stores, you'll go on vacations or fun trips into virtual world that kind of would look like things in the real world or things that are kind of from fiction, and on and on, and you'll be able to do all those things in the metaverse. Right now, people are beginning to build what I called worlds or experiences. So sometimes you can build an experience where, for example, Fortel are a company that I talked about that works a lot with healthcare professionals and therapists. They have a variety of rooms and worlds that you basically download the app on your VR headsets. You have the app, I have the app, we meet there, we can talk, we can have other people join us, and we can do a variety of things. We are inside that kind of experience. You can have a world that has multiple experiences that you can work between them. The metaverse will actually have multiple worlds that are connected to each other, and those worlds would allow you to move between them as yourself, regardless of how you want to be perceived or looked in terms of what avatar, and you can move your assets with you. So you'll be able to spend a lot of time doing whatever you want to do in those worlds. So the metaverse, as I perceive it, will probably come to life 7 years from now, 10 years from now, maybe even 5 years from now. We'll start seeing some early elements of that. Right now, people are beginning to build experiences in the world that eventually will connect and become the metaverse.
So right now, there's surveys out there, some statistics that indicate very high percentage of people have some sort of mental health disorder, and some of it's exacerbated or brought on entirely by the pandemic. In a world of where we have the metaverse, can you speculate on whether the overall mental health of the population will be better, worse, or just different?
Probably different would be kind of. If you force me to take a side, I can probably make the case for both sides.
Yeah.
Obviously, kind of part of the challenges kind of that people have is that the real world doesn't really conform to what they want it to be.
Yeah.
In a sense, but you can't influence that too much. The world is what the world is, and people that have mental health challenges are basically trying to adjust the world to their needs, and it doesn't really work for them. So in that sense, kind of a world with a metaverse will allow you to choose worlds that fit what you're looking for,
Mm-hmm.
and find places where you're comfortable and spend more time in those places where you can't really do that in the real world. So that's the positive look on allowing people to find their spot and, in a sense, reduce the amount of people that have those issues. On the other side, since we're going to overwhelm ourselves with a variety of worlds, I could see how that would overwhelm people and potentially exacerbate kind of issues they have that have been under control
Yeah.
in this one world we're living in, and suddenly they'll have to make adjustments that maybe their body is not geared to adjust.
Well, if I'm still doing the podcast in 7 years or so, we'll have you back, or you'll be on the metaverse, and we can see how that is going on. If we could even,
Yeah, no, we can have the podcast in the metaverse.
yeah, that'll be good. I look forward to that. So, final question is really about away from the professional and back to the personal. Or you can keep it in the professional realm too, if you prefer. Which is, are there any books that you're been reading lately that you would recommend to our viewers, and I guess any you would recommend you stay away from?
I'll stay away from the staying away. So
Okay.
I'll start with two that I've read in the past and I've actually reread multiple times, and they relate to this world. So the first one is Snow Crash, and Snow Crash basically is the beginning of where the metaverse kind of came to life. And the next one is Ready Player One, which is where kind of you take that concept and you can start envisioning. And I really recommend reading the book
Yeah.
rather than seeing the movie, because the fun things where they really kind of go into the detail of the worlds that were created in that fictional world are very, very powerful. In terms of books I recently read that I would recommend, and there's a lot of really good, and I like having kind of reading fiction books that kind of make you think about different worlds or different ways the world is. So one of them is a book called The Book of Two Ways by Jodi Picoult, and really, really good book. And it just makes you think about kind of paths you make in life and decisions, and it plays around between kind of two paths that you could have taken in kind of parallel universes, and kind of running them simultaneously so you can see the back and forth, and how the obvious choice here is not the obvious choice there, and how those kind of basically come to be. That's a pretty cool one that I read. The other one is Sea of Tranquility that recently came out. I
Yeah.
think it came out early this year, and it's an awesome book. It's definitely one of my favorite in recent times. So hopefully those four books will get some of the listeners some fun evenings of reading.
Now that sounds good. They sound like something I may try myself, so I appreciate that. None of those are ones that have been recommended by prior guests, so I'm looking forward to digging in there. Well, Lyron Bentovim, President and CEO and founder of Glimpse Group, thank you very much for joining me today on the HealthBiz podcast.
Great, David. I enjoyed our conversation and looking forward to do the next one in the metaverse in 7 years.
Sounds good. You've been listening to the HealthBiz podcast with me, David Williams, President of Health Business Group. I conduct in-depth interviews with leaders in healthcare business and policy. If you like what you hear, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite service. While you're at it, go ahead and subscribe on your second and third favorite services as well. There's more good stuff to come, and you won't want to miss an episode. If your organization is seeking strategy consulting services in healthcare, check out our website, healthbusinessgroup.com.